So in the last 2 decades, we've seen many revolutionary devices that have changed the way we live our lives. Many of these devices have been released by Apple.
And we are calling it iPhone.
The iPad, MacBook Pro,
The iPod Touch.
Apple Watch.
But as we enter into the new decade, you might have realized that these days, each new device isn't very different from the one before it. So it's more important than ever that we properly consider our purchases and not to fall for the trap of the hype of new tech. So I've just bought the new iPad Pro 2020 with the Apple Pencil and the new Magic Keyboard. And on the screen, I've got my favorite screen protector, which is the paperlike screen protector, and they are also kindly sponsoring this video. I'm going to tell you a bit more about that later on. But I bought these in order to test this out, and I've been using this combination of the iPad intensely for the last day and a half. And I'm going to say off the bat that there are some things I like a lot about the iPad and the keyboard and the pencil altogether, and there are some things that I don't like. So instead of me just sitting here and waffling about the new A12Z Bionic chip and the new liquid retina display and the new camera, which in all honesty isn't gonna make much difference to most people out there, I thought that in this video I'm gonna structure it slightly differently, and I'm gonna mention 3 things that I really liked about this and 3 things that I didn't like so much. And hopefully that should help you making a decision if you want to buy this specific device. The first thing I like is the overall aesthetic, just the look and the feel of it. And there's no doubt that this whole thing just looks sick. Although the design hasn't changed since 2018, I think the fact that it's symmetrical, it has the same width of the bezels all around, both vertically and horizontally, coupled with the squared look and the thinness, just makes it feel like a really expensive piece of metal when you're holding it in your hand. And now with the new Magic Keyboard, you've got this kind of floating look, which is quite novel, and I don't think we've seen this approach taken with any of the other tablets in the tablet market. So overall, in terms of the aesthetics, I think there's no further discussion needed. And then we move on to the second point, which is versatility. There are many things I've liked about the iPad over the last few years, but versatility hasn't been one of them. I've never really used the iPad as a replacement for my laptop. It's always kind of been my laptop on one side and then using the iPad on the other side, almost as an accessory to my laptop. But now many things have changed, especially with the new Magic Keyboard. Firstly, having the keyboard with the trackpad strangely makes it feel like I'm using a laptop. The trackpad seamlessly integrates into the iPad OS. We've got the cursor actually feeling a bit like the cursor on a laptop. You can swipe left and right and switch between apps. You can select stuff. It feels quite nice. Browsing Safari, searching stuff on YouTube, even writing essays feels quite normal. And whenever you want to take some notes, you can just pop out the Apple Pencil and open up Notability. And if you don't want to use the trackpad, then you can use a mouse, connect it through Bluetooth or through a USB-C adapter. I think it's truly just a matter of time until we see this massive shift from using laptops to things like the iPad. And I think as time moves on as well, we're going to see apps that have exclusively been just for laptop use or Mac use and start popping up and be more available on iPad OS, for example. And I would say that aspect, coupled with the trackpad and the keyboard, the Apple Pencil, the ability to use a mouse on it, makes this a potential productivity beast. And an additional point is that I mentioned paperlike beforehand, and personally I feel like that just adds to the experience, where when you take the Apple Pencil out and you're writing on the screen, it feels like you're writing on paper, it sounds like you're writing on paper, and then you could just jump back to the keyboard and type on the keyboard. And I would say overall that does add to the versatility. So if you do decide to get an iPad, whether it's this one or a different one, then there's a link in the description. If you want, you can use that to get a screen protector for your expensive iPad. And now we move on to the third point, which is to do with the keyboard. I feel like it deserves its own point. And I'm going to start off by saying that the buttons feel really good to press on. There's a decent travel distance, and I'll give it that. But I'm also going to say something that is slightly more controversial, which is that I don't really like them much more than the old smart keyboard buttons. I mean, it feels different. It feels nice, but it doesn't feel better. They feel just as good as each other, really. But on the other hand, the trackpad is very, very responsive, and it takes up a sizable amount of the keyboard as well, which is quite nice, so you can move around your finger without it feeling too small really. The keyboard is also backlit, which means that if the room is pitch black, you can still see which buttons you're pressing. And the other new thing is that on the caps lock, there is also a light. So if the caps lock is on, the capital letters, then you can see that the green light is on. And if it's off, then it's off. That's something that you didn't have on the old keyboard. And the magnet on the keyboard also quite strongly attaches to the iPad, which is quite good because it just improves that portability a bit more. It means that the iPad doesn't fall off when you don't want it to. But I am gonna say that it has taken me some time to get used to the keyboard. Maybe it's because I've been using the wireless Magic Keyboard for my laptop, and that is quite a bit bigger than the Magic Keyboard for the iPad. So I feel like maybe it's because my hands are a bit bigger and I keep missing buttons, but it's been getting better as I've been using the keyboard. But I thought I'd mention that anyway. So overall, I would say with the aesthetics, with the versatility, with the keyboard itself, it's quite good. Now let's move on to the things that I don't like so much. The first thing is portability. This thing is quite heavy. I mean, I was looking at some statistics and the Magic Keyboard weighs as much as the iPad. The iPad and the Magic Keyboard together weigh as much as the MacBook Air. So back in the day, we used to say that, you know what, the iPad is really nice because it's very portable, you can carry it everywhere, it weighs less than a MacBook Pro. That argument has now been nullified, it goes out of the window. We can't really say that anymore. Having said that now though, just because it's slightly heavier than it used to be, it doesn't mean that it's gonna feel heavy when you're carrying it around. It's not like you're physically gonna get tired and exhausted from carrying just an iPad and a keyboard and an Apple Pencil. I've actually been testing it out and walking around with it a bit. And yeah, it's not to that extent, but it's just one more thing to think about when you're considering what to buy. The only thing that the weight is affected, I would say, when you're carrying it is when you're holding the iPad on the Apple Pencil side. It makes it feel slightly more awkward. It's almost like the Apple Pencil becomes a bit more unstable, as if when you're holding it, it's about to fall off. Like you're holding it with a bit more force, which means that you're pushing on the pen a bit more. Yeah, so it's not like a pleasant feeling. And I guess the other thing with the Apple Pencil attaching to the iPad using a magnet is that you need to be cautious when you're putting it into a sleeve, like in a bag or something, that you don't get the Apple Pencil caught and it falls off, and maybe if you didn't notice, you might lose the pen. So that's an aspect you need to be a bit more careful about. But yeah, I don't know, maybe I'm just being picky here, but this is something I noticed, so I thought it was worth mentioning for you guys too. Now, the second thing I don't like is that although I've mentioned that the iPad Pro together with the keyboard, together with the pencil, is very, very versatile, it can be a bit difficult to extract that versatility. Let me give you an example. When I was in medical school, I used to use the iPad Pro all the time when I was on clinical placement in the hospital, in clinics and in the ward round. And mainly I used to use it as a note-taking device. But now with the new Magic Keyboard, it doesn't allow that 360-degree flex, which means that it's very, very difficult to use it as a note-taking device. The only real way you can do that is by detaching the iPad Pro from the keyboard. Now, if I'm on clinical placement or at work at the hospital, I don't want to have to think about taking the keyboard into one hand and the iPad Pro in another hand, and then how am I going to walk around with this? Where am I going to put the keyboard? I'll put it in some office, forget that it's there, go home, or I have to come back and get it. It's just difficult. And for me, this is a design flaw that acts as a barrier to productivity, in my opinion. It would have been nice if they had some kind of mechanical integration where the Apple Pencil seamlessly works together with the keyboard. The fact that it doesn't flex all the way is a bit of a sticky one. And now we move on to the third disadvantage, which is the price point, and it's expensive as hell. Now, personally, I bought the cheapest setup possible, which was the 11-inch at 128 gigabytes with the Apple Pencil, with the Magic Keyboard, and that cost me about £1,100 to £1,200, and that's not a small amount. I mean, especially if you're like a student or you're not working, it's difficult to fathom how you're gonna fork out that much cash for this whole thing. And it goes a step beyond that if you wanna get like the nicer aspect of it, which is the 12-inch. And if you go for the 12-inch with 256 gigabytes with the Apple Pencil and the keyboard, that takes you up to £1,537, I think. Yeah, that's it. Bruh, that ain't a joke. That's a lot of cash. So I would say overall, it would take some proper consideration of the pros and cons. If you're working and you have that spare cash to spend, then this is definitely very, very nice. And I mentioned before, like how it looks very nice. It does feel productive. It feels like a laptop. It might even replace your laptop. That's how nice it is. It might be worth spending that cash. But if I take a student perspective here, where cash is a bit more restricted, okay, there's a bit more of a budget here, it might be more value for money in getting a second-hand version of this new iPad Pro, or getting the older version, so the 2018 iPad Pro. That might be even more value for money, to be honest. That would be my perspective on things currently, but I'm going to make a few more videos about this where we can kind of compare different models and compare the keyboards and compare this to a laptop as well. So I hope that helped, and I hope you liked this video, and I hope you found this useful. I hope you gathered some value from this, and if you really did, then do comment and say what you think. Give me your thoughts. Like the video. Liking the video helps the algorithm. It's not personally that I like having my video liked. I don't really care about that aspect. It's more that, you know, it helps the algorithm. It means that more people will see the videos and the channel grows, and that's what's important to me. So yeah, do that, and yeah, follow me on Instagram, and yeah, safe.